Welcome to the Advantage Podcast, a monthly unscripted conversation with host David Ashcraft and top leaders impacting our world. Created by pastors for pastors to strengthen our leadership and expand our knowledge and influence.
Hey, well, welcome to the Advantage Podcast, and I'm excited to have Bart and Doug here as my guest, and you heard a little bit of their intro, but let me just find out and let you find out a little bit more about each of them. And so, Bart, I think you said your background was Southeast Christian or South Central Church in Las Vegas. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, I'm originally from Kentucky, where Southeast Christian Church is.
Oh, were you? Okay.
Yeah. So I was in ministry there at Crossroads Christian Church. But yeah, what brought me to Vegas was ministering at Central Christian Church. I joined the team there and was on the executive team for 12 years, from 98 until late 2009. So about 12 years. And
Okay.
got to see so many cool things and growth, and it was a great place to grow up in ministry. Yep.
Who was pastor there when you were there then? Was that?
I got the privilege of splitting my time exactly 50-50 with Gene Apple and then Judd Wilhite.
Okay.
And Judd is still there today.
Right.
And he preached yesterday, did a great job, and we just love that church. Even though we're full-time in intentional churches, that's still our home base.
Yeah, very cool. Good. That's great. Fun to know that. Thank you, Bart. And then Doug, tell me your background real quick.
Yeah, anybody who's been around me anytime knows I always start back in my origin story because it's so critical to why I do what I do. So I grew up in southeastern Ohio, near West Virginia, about 20 minutes from there, from the border. And so I'm a diehard Steelers fan, David. How were the 70s for the Cowboys, man? But, in all seriousness, I had a very miraculous coming to Christ because of a very missional youth pastor in a small town of 1,600. And literally saved my life. People where I'm from, blue collar, don't leave. And so that's some of my kind of why in me. But real quickly, went to a small Bible college, Cincinnati, ended up being a Chick-fil-A owner operator at 21. I was the youngest they'd ever hired in a mall there in Cincinnati. And then moved to Vegas in 1997, the beginning, to help start and plant a church called Canyon Ridge Christian Church, which was a daughter of Central, Bart's church. With, again, if you're older, you'll remember Mike Bro. I'm learning these young guys don't know the names Mike Bro or Gene Apple very much.
Exactly. Yeah. Very good. So, the way we came across you guys, I think Andy Martin on our team came across your book, Intentional Churches, and this is his copy. It's well worn, and you can see he's used it heavily. And he started after reading that, bragging about you guys and what you had written, and kept telling us here at The Advantage, we've got to read this, we've got to read this. And what he would always say is it's essentially what LCBC has done over the years, but you guys are just putting it down on paper and written the book. And so that was our first introduction to you. And so we'd love to talk about that. Though first I have to clarify, both of you have come out of Christian churches. And it's always funny because all of you, well, first of all, I'll say most of the big churches I know in the country, many of the big churches come out of that same background. You always deny that you're a denomination. We're like, oh, no, we're not a denomination. We're not really affiliated, but you are somehow, right? So what do you call yourselves?
Well, Bart should answer this because his dad's like kind of a bishop in the non-denominational network.
Yeah, well, we are a denomination. So our publications and colleges kind of tied us together. But really, our roots go back, the movement's roots go back to the Restoration Movement in the Frontier, Cane Ridge Revival, and then a couple of preachers, Bart and W. Stone, Alexander Campbell, got together and said, we're going to strip away the denominational ties, and we're just going to be Christians only. And so what the Bible says we're going to do, we're going to go back to Acts 2. If it's not in the Bible, we're not going to do it. So it's really a unity restoration type movement, but it does have a lot of churches that are affiliated, and we call it a brotherhood, but what in the world is that?
That's an insurance company. That's a pseudo insurance company. I think the Brotherhood of something.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. Yeah, we're not tied to Brotherhood Mutual, but at the end of the day, I'm so proud for that to be a part of my heritage because it was a unity movement and it had so many. It's allowed us to have a vision at IC, for instance, to create a model we're teaching, but yet have over 30 denominations involved in it because we just try to stay really simple and biblically basic around the Great Commission and what the Bible says to do, especially with the Acts 2 model church. So hopefully that explains it a little bit.
Yeah, very good. So I know what we're excited about, you guys and what you're doing. And again, we're talking to the largest the churches, the pastors of the largest churches in Pennsylvania, and others that they are mentoring as well. And what you guys spend a lot of time doing is trying to help churches thrive and saying, what does it take for a church to have vitality, experience vitality, to be growing and really effective in their ministry? And so maybe give us a little bit of a snapshot of the background. How did Intentional Church even come about, and kind of your goals?
Yep.
Yeah, I think initially we started, I had a Chick-fil-A background, so I had a lot of tools in my toolkit that was gifted there by Chick-fil-A. And so I, on one end, was starting to experiment with bringing, at that time, strategic planning to the church in a way that was palatable to, our church locally here at that time. And then Bart could share a little bit more about his journey, but basically we were very influenced early on by a strategic planning kind of corporate entity. But we quickly learned by going church by church in America across like denoms. This is in the early years. We're talking like 15, 14, 13 years ago, that what was really broken, if I can say that without being critical, like the ecclesiology and missiology were what were broken in the American church. And so then we began to redesign kind of our journey, and it really became its own thing of like, how do we pull a team back to scriptural fundamentals? And really, that the Great Commission was never intended to be an organizational or institutional mission statement. It was always meant to be a personal mission statement for every follower of Jesus. And then have a team then go through a process now facing that reality of, well, how are we doing at equipping, activating, and mobilizing our people to go live the Great Commission every day of their life? And then run planning tools against it to keep us aligned. And what we found very quickly was that when you do that, the byproduct is growth, whether it's in attendance or whatever else, the byproduct is growth. And very quickly, misalignment seeps back in whenever you grow and you bring systems and you begin to believe lies, silver bullets, like that it's a model or a program or an idea that wins and grows people, or advertising or marketing, instead of mobilizing and activating our people to do it.
Yeah, that's good. So go back. You made a statement and said in the church you guys saw two things that you felt like were broken. I think I heard you say ecclesiology. Was that one?
Yep.
And then you said just the mission of the church as well. And so describe what you mean by broken and unpack that a little bit if you would.
All of us, including myself, had allowed subconsciously that this, what I've coined the phrase institutional thinking, to seep in.
Okay.
This is what I mean by broken ecclesiology, that we believe that it was our actual events, programmatic offerings, um, ideas, latest sermon series that is why people would come to Jesus.
Mm,
And people did show up, and there was a generation that identified with those strategies. But we believe, when you look at scripture, that's actually not how Jesus exemplified living the Great Commission through the Gospels and beyond. It was a very hands-on, while we're going about the mission, you're going to learn about some of these other things.
mm,
And then the missiology was realizing that in all of our work as church leaders in America, like including my own church, we saw missiology again slip more in this institutional mindset, as opposed to it's actually the job of every individual Christian, including the leaders, board, and everybody else. They're not,
yeah.
like, for instance, a board isn't a board of directors. It should be looked at as, first, are our board members living out the Great Commission personally? Is there fruit of new believers in their life?
Mm, mm. Interesting. So how did you and Bart get together? How did you team up and come up with, and where did the idea of the intentional church come from then, ultimately?
Yeah. So I'll hit this one. So I was working at Central and running kind of a publishing and training ministry that was an expression kind of a teaching church. This would have been in the mid 2000s because we'd gotten very big, and that was kind of what we did back then. Churches would, because we had churches asking about our model and teaching and stuff like that. And I thought it was awesome. But then the economic crisis happened and kind of spun me through a life plan into uh, kind of being launched really to do something more kingdom wide. I, like Doug had said, my vision, and eventually uh, we would find out was the resonating vision of both of us, was that we could create a planning model that would keep churches focused on the biblical fundamentals of the Great Commission and a simple Acts 2 model church. And that if we could do that, then we could probably see church collaboration happening around the US, if not around the world, if we built it right and kept it simple. And that would allow us to basically see thousands of churches collaborating to reach millions for Christ like never before across denominational lines, because it was so biblically fundamental and rooted in really good team-based Socratic planning. We came to believe both in that. So we were at a dinner, God orchestrated, where I knew Doug from college. A part of our story is I was a couple of years ahead of Doug at Cincinnati Christian University, but he's across town here in Vegas ministering. We didn't really know, weren't connected all that much. And a mutual friend got us to a dinner, and we started to realize we have the same vision for both our life and calling. And I was starting to learn about starting to build a toolbox. He had a toolbox, and I think we basically said, Doug, if I'm not right, let's go work with a church together, because there were churches kind of around asking for our help. And so that began the development of what we call the Living Toolbox, the IC Living Toolbox and model. And really, over 4 years, 4 or 5 years, without Doug was still working at the church. I was working for another consulting operation, actually based out of Chicago, grown out of the Willow Creek Community Church. And so we're working together with churches, but building the toolbox on the fly. And then God sort of orchestrated it such that I could invest full time into the implementation of that model and scaling it. Doug was at a place he could do that as well. And so in 2013, after 4 or 5 years of R&D and development, a lot of Holy Spirit driven, insight and moments, we decided we were going to link arms, start intentional churches, and try to scale this thing and see if this vision of a collaborative movement of evangelistic churches using the same toolbox could even be remotely right and real. The last thing is, we knew it was going to require one by one work. That's how it had to be, whites of the eyes. We bootstrapped. We never saw ourselves as consultants, always as church leaders coming alongside other church leaders, trying to develop a pattern and a model that could scale around, hopefully, the world. And so we've learned as much from working with those churches and those leaders and as anything else. And so now we've solidified and codified it, and that's what that red book you held up contains, the core essence and items of the intentional church's living toolbox. So
that's very cool. And part of what we appreciate about you guys, even as you're describing all that, Bart, is for the advantage. That's really our focus as well. Let's collaborate together across the state of Pennsylvania, do everything we can to introduce more people to Jesus. And so
love that.
that you guys have.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's real cool.
it's good. And I would just add, David, what you're saying right now from the get-go has been the DNA of IC, that Bart and I never wanted to do anything alone. And in fact, the very first meetings of IC in 2013, we invited like 4 or 5 of our friends in to come in and do the planning together. And so even now that we're at the numbers of churches we are engaged in this movement, kind of network of churches, it is all seen. We see it as a collaborative effort, like that Bart and I aren't the thought leaders. The actual best thoughts are coming from those leaders at the ground now. Like we almost can't keep up with the innovations.
That's cool. That's very cool. So it's funny, you guys are, how do I say this? It's almost like you've got a system to help churches thrive, and yet you're also saying it's not the system that causes the churches to thrive. So you're anti-system, which fits with you're not a denomination, you're a Christian denomination, but you're not a denomination. So you guys always deny whatever you are, but that's okay if it's effective. That works. So there are 3 things, or at least as I understand, 3 core principles you guys focus on in helping churches. One's clarity of vision and purpose, and just making sure they're good at that. The other is strategic planning, and the other is just healthy leadership. And so maybe let's talk a little bit, as you guys work with churches, what are some of the number one problems you see, and then how do you begin to work with those churches to course correct or to fix some of the issues you're facing?
Hmm. Such a tough question because each church, like I was on the phone this morning or on a Zoom call with the church in Ohio, and it's a whole different set of issues.
Hmm.
It's a reinvention of a church that's dwindled to 100, and it's got political winds aflame of, again, ecclesiology and missiology. The ecclesiology of a core of 5 or 6 power brokers in the church
Hmm.
is controlling the thing from the view of their ecclesiology is personal preference,
Hmm.
not actually a biblical basis.
Okay.
So it is difficult sometimes to answer that. I would say, by and large, one of the biggest headwinds we see, and you're going to see a lot of stuff coming out from us in the next 6 months, is misalignment in leadership. And people might have a nice mission and vision statement that they've crafted and it's wordsmith, but that's not actually what's being lived out and strategized around.
Okay.
And I don't know what Bart would say here, but I believe it's this idea of, because they are not truly anchored to a biblical understanding of how Jesus exemplified the Great Commission in the New Testament. For instance, Levi comes to Christ. He's immediately in an evangelistic environment, which he's being criticized by the long-term Pharisees for being in.
Yeah.
Right? How many of the apostles, when they're called, the first things they're doing are they're evangelistically going with Jesus and learning along the way, not coming over here to a church and being prepped for 2, 3, 4 years in classes to go. And
Yeah.
so this misalignment around the Great Commission. And then the other thing I would say for us, I think one of the things around the vision question you asked is we teach vision as dynamic, not static. And there's a
Okay.
lot of vision discipline out there that teaches vision as you go up on the mountain and you get the 5-year, 3-year, 10-year vision, and you don't change it until you get there. We would teach actually God's revealing more as you grow, especially if you're activating the Great Commission in people and you're learning along the way. And your vision today, we believe, should be way more about a vision for an individual believer. How will their life be different? How will their practices be different? And especially a non-believer, if somebody came to Christ today, how would their, instead of, again, this nuanced, an institutional vision, here's what a great church we're going to become. We teach you got to really start at this dynamic personal vision of what an unbeliever is going to become in Christ. And if a whole bunch of those come to Jesus and follow him, then we'll have a great church, a great
So
institution.
what would a vision statement then look like for a church that's following what you're saying?
A restatement of the Great Commission, probably.
Okay.
We would lean more into that as more the mission, but yeah. Bart, I don't know if you would add anything as a vision statement for.
Well, what we've realized is that almost everything we were teaching organizationally has got a personal side and parallel to it. In fact, we're coming in and realizing that there's been the institutionalization, I suppose, of our thinking in church leadership versus owning it personally. So when we put vision together, we put personal vision for the one right alongside organizational vision for the organization.
Okay. Okay.
So we literally we so I'm going to go back and just answer that question a little bit myself. I think the number one thing we discovered was when you put the one, that's our nickname out of Luke 15 for the lost. It's not, we didn't invent it. A lot of people use it, but when you put the one in the middle of everything, it not only messes with your organization, that's where we were when we started an organizational model. It really becomes really personally challenging. So we're developing a personal material to mobilize every believer, including all of leaders, to be one aware and activated in their life, having a one, praying for one, and equipped to reach. Because both things have to be true. To me, that's the number one thing we realized was when you put that filter on everything, even the church that thinks they're the most evangelistic church on the planet, when you put those lenses on everything, all of your scoring of how you're really doing, all of your plans and your priorities for your church to change. But then you start to realize they've got to change for me and my leadership. And I know you believe this, David, because you led a church that was much like Central, where I came from, where the lost was in the center of all the thinking all the time. And so when we put vision together, we got to put a vision together for the one, ourselves and our 99 as mobilized followers, and then organizational vision's got to be there because we still do believe in gathering together. And so if in 5 years we know we need to be in 2 locations or that our building needs to be bigger, that's not a strategy to grow. That's anticipating growth is happening because of the other two
Yeah.
things. And that we also do need an organizational planning that anticipates people are going to be reached and stuff better be happening here at the organization as well.
So describe a little bit, then you guys mentioned misalignment towards the vision. So let's just say, and I'm trying to think through what a vision statement may be. And so, our mission, vision, and we would go back and forth at LCBC, is this our mission, our vision? And so we said, let's not get caught up in the semantics of it. But bottom line, we just want to introduce more people to Jesus, together fully follow him, which goes back to the Matthew kind of passage. And so what would misalignment be when you go into churches and you see misalignment? What kind of things would be misaligned?
well, can I give one, Doug, and then I'm going to let
Yeah.
you go?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
I wanted to mention this a minute ago. One thing that's misaligned in general is Doug's already alluded to it, but you've got a team together. You're trying to lead this church, and we don't even have common definitions of what something like discipleship really means. We don't have a common understanding of the purpose of the church in the world. We many churches don't have a mission statement that's a restatement of the Great Commission like you just did, David. So I've said one of the things we're doing in the model first is by leaning into what we teach is you're kind of level setting the leadership worldview of all the leaders together, and that may take a while. You may have some because it gets personal, and people come from different backgrounds, and
So
so
meaning not everybody agrees on the purpose of a church.
of
And so
church of the
that's why
church
you've got to
and
get
even
aligned with
definitions
it.
of what
Yeah.
things are. So that's one thing that's misaligned almost every single time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I'm going to list off I know I'm not answering the question exactly yet, David, but we stumbled onto this. Almost everything we come out with is learning from the churches. And the misalignment takes form. Maybe some of your listeners can identify with this. It takes form in what we call the poor evaluation standards. So, poor evaluation standard number one, people are misaligned because they're evaluating our vision accomplishment or our next strategies through personal preferences. And it's about their own personal preference. Number two, the comparison to other churches. Like LCBC does this, and then therefore we should do that. Or one of my favorites as an executive pastor was the Willow programming budget is XYZ. I'm like, well, we're not Willow. But comparative, or I came from this great church and they did XYZ. We should add this programming. Getting better, although getting better should be a meeting we're having. We should celebrate wins and how we're getting better. But we would say when you're trying to get alignment in a group toward a vision, getting better is to be celebrated. It should not be the standard by which we're measuring. Is our strategy working? We should be identifying those measures. And then my personal bugaboo in church leadership, the anecdotal evidence, the anecdotal story, which again, we would say all day long, in the modern church, you should be telling stories of life change. But we use it in church leadership it's a sign of misalignment when your team is like, I know a family who left our church because fill in the blank, actually trying to advance usually a personal preference agenda. And then our charismatic brothers told us about the God card. God told me, conversation over. So, misalignments are all over the place, but we found like if you can identify when these poor evaluation standards are happening, it will tell you when misalignment is seeping in if you're hearing these in things. And I would say right now, and you may not want to go into this, which is fine, we believe and have believed now for a couple of years, we're actually on the verge, if not in revival in America. A lot of churches are growing very fast, and misalignment, I would argue, is seeping in at every turn with that growth. And if you don't know why that growth is happening, is it out of a biblical fundamental model? If you don't know why it's happening, I guarantee you those poor evaluation standards are seeping in at every turn in your team.
So I assume knowing why you're growing, that's some of that evaluation that you're talking about. So what kind of things do you recommend guys look at? The pastors that we're talking to, how do they evaluate if they're going the right direction or not?
I'll I want to say this will get at what you're talking about. But a part of what we teach in the Red Book is teaching them kind of a really simple model to begin with that we don't overly define. Their application of the biblical Acts 2 fundamental that's taught in the Great Commission engine is kind of for the church to define. We're teaching principle, they're teaching practice and application of how you do a weekend. We don't have a big prescriptive way you would do a weekend. So part of the thing you've got to do is we've all got to agree to the fundamental purpose of the gathering. We've got to all fundamentally agree to the purpose of strategies to build life-changing relationships. We've all got to fundamentally agree to the purpose around mobilization and people surrendering and living their life surrendered. So once we've understood the principle, now we can build our application on top of it, but judge it against the principle of its health to the end or its purpose. And so that when we use that simple model in the beginning and we teach people how to eliminate the poor standards of evaluation, to stay on principle, not necessarily on preference or practice, they'll find because our underlying belief is, David, that you are on a hunt for Holy Spirit driven action to unlock the gospel potential of your church, because your church actually is infinitely powerful because of the power of the gospel and the power of the gospel to be released. So we're just hunting for unlocks. And so
But I guess what I think I'm hearing you say is the problem we often have. We all believe what you just said. This is what we want to be, but we skip the understanding the purpose, and then we just go and we start copying other churches or saying, "Oh, it must be small groups. It must be a seeker-focused worship service, or whatever it may be." And
that's
if we do
right.
that, then that's going to bring the results we want, as opposed to going back and saying, "Let's make sure the foundation is strong," and it may take on different forms in different churches.
That's right.
Exactly. I would use the word, even again, as I led a church, helped lead a church, assumed. The biblical foundation was assumed, and it is in a lot of churches. And that's
Yeah,
why I said, you're in a church that's dying. Hey, it's easy to go back to the drawing board. Easier. It's not easy work, but it's easier to get into a diagnostic. But if your church is growing, like a lot of churches are right now, and you don't understand why you're assuming that that's aligned, we would caution you. You should be
yeah.
working toward this idea of like, how are we going to, fight this tendency to drift inward, this tendency to assume that it's a programmatic answer or a model answer. And it's part of the reason why, when it comes to models,
But
I
you're
get
not against the models, though. That's what I find
no,
fascinating with what you're saying is you're all for models, you're all for strategies. It's just making sure that that's not viewed as the solution.
Yeah.
correct. And it's why we've been able to work in missional community models, what would have been called attractional models, house church models. We've been able to work in all those because we're not judging the model. We're trying to get them back beyond the model to understand, like you said, the
Yeah,
foundational
yeah.
reasoning. It's not the model that delivers, it's the
If
biblical thing. And that's just the model you're choosing or discerning God's wanting you to deploy in that setting.
if your belief is that our job is to plant and water and God brings the increase, then the only thing we're trying to agree to is where, when, and how to plant and water.
Yeah.
And the problem is there are so many things, so many, if you made a list, options. So the other thing we're teaching church to do is discern on priority and sequence. And once you've agreed to priority and sequence, the 10 things you've been feeling, and you do that with Holy Spirit driven tools and insight, I believe, uh, then you've agreed to the one or two things that God's given you in the next season to do. Man, it's go, it's
So
get the
part
boat.
of,
Yeah.
but what you just said there is there's lots of different ways to plant and water. And
Yep.
so a church has to decide, okay, this is how we're going to plant and water and cultivate that seed and move forward. Yeah.
That's
That's
right.
right.
And we don't overly prescribe. My life was changed. I will say I was going to go into ministry when I went with my father to the Willow Creek Community Church. And I don't want this could be a little bit of, I don't know what people think of the Willow model, but it was everything to me at the first, they called it the CLC before they called it
Yeah.
Prevailing Church. And then
Church Leadership Conference. Yeah.
I was at the first CLC. There were 200 of us. Actually, Bob Russell from Southeast Christian in Louisville, you mentioned them. Their team and my dad's team went. and they taught that it was turned me upside down and inside out that we could build a church for lost people, people that weren't there yet. And I know that sounds so silly,
Yeah.
but the only church I had known, and my father is an evangelist at heart, was still inside the walls, by and large built for the 99, even though he was an evangelist and he had other evangelists with him. He was a soul winner, baptizer. I mean, still is to this day. But it revolutionized his church, revolutionized my future when we realized that that is to me the fundamental that we don't give in on. That
That you
and
focus on the one, not the 99.
that you imbalance on purpose toward the
Yeah.
one, because the 99 create a lot of pressures unintentionally to be focused on them, and we need both. And the number one challenge that purifies the whole system is who's your one, who are you mobilized to reach? And it doesn't matter what age. My mother was just talking to me yesterday about their church and some changes they're making, and how there was an older couple that my folks are connected to. My dad goes there. He preaches, but that's his home church, but not where he preaches. And my mom was lamenting, and she said that this couple was leaving because of changes, really to reach the one. And it's all because of how it was communicated. And if that couple just can catch that vision, they'll be all in, because the one is their grandkid and the one is their friend,
Yeah.
and so on. So anyway,
Yeah, I
it's a
know at
great purifier.
LCBC, as people would come into the church. Early days, we called it newcomers class. Now we call it first steps and things like that. But one of the things we say in that class, now that you're here, it's not about you anymore. It's about those that are still
Yeah.
not here yet. And so we start planting that seed immediately. That everything we do, we want to help you grow, but it's really about reaching the person that's not here yet. So, and you're here
Yeah.
now. So,
Well,
I
and I
love
would
that
say,
about your ministry, by the
oh
way, as
yeah,
I've learned about it.
I want to affirm, man, your leadership at LCBC, because it was a forerunner. Like, we're Gen Xers, it was a forerunner to what we believe is emerging now, that Gen Z and millennials are going to come to Christ in droves, and they are already, because of work like what LCBC was doing to mobilize. The only thing I would add is, hey, if you're a church leader listening, the kryptonite of Christian consumerism, if whatever that means to you, is getting someone on mission. I mean, think about how Jesus turned a bunch of self-centered guys around very quickly. He got them on mission immediately. It wasn't about them, to your point, anymore. They were dying to
yeah.
self.
So then talk a little bit. You mentioned revival, and it feels like there is a sense of revival happening. You mentioned Gen Z and just kind of what they're looking for in a conversation with a church leader, several over the last week, and saying it feels like in church now there's an acceptance to, I hate to say this, almost going back to the Bible, but it's almost okay now to just come out and just preach straight out of the Bible and not feel like you've got to jump all these hoops to get there. So how does that measure up, or how does that work with what you're saying, where that could feel like it gets insider very quickly that way? So what are signs that a church is starting to turn inward? What are cautions that people ought to be watching for?
Mhm. Well, I would say, number one, on the revival side and Gen Z and millennials, I probably had a half a dozen conversations last week with lead pastors who, instead of tailoring messages that are more sensitive, are coming hard with biblical truth,
Yeah,
and finding millennials actually leaning into the guardrails
right.
of harder truth and to a one, and they're all experiencing conversion growth in these churches. And I think that is a nuanced difference generationally that's happened. I think there were a lot of churches giving biblical truth before, but a lot imported some of these strategies in a way that back down on biblical truth. And if I find it fascinating in my lifetime, I get to see this, not fire and brimstone, but man, pretty like, we did a 6-week series on sexuality. Like, holy
Yeah,
cow.
yeah,
Yeah. And at the end of the day, I think the younger generation, what we're learning, they value things at a deeper level than we understand. Authenticity and vulnerability. Like, I was taught, suck it up, move on, work harder, grind it out. that actually doesn't play very well to a millennial. But admitting, I've struggled with this, or this is like that vulnerability thing is going to be a key piece inside of the scriptural truth that's being kind of laid down. Are you finding the same thing, David? Like pastors are going way more after this. We're going
Yeah.
to talk about sexuality. We're going to talk about all these cultural issues.
Yeah, it's almost like there's a desire to hear, what does the Bible say? And they may not come in knowing anything even about the Bible, but they're looking for something that gives them a foundation or a root that they can dig deep in to give a guiding light for how to do life or things to that nature. So yes, it
Yeah.
definitely seems that way. Whereas before we felt like we had to work our way to getting to what the Bible says, and now it almost feels like we can just jump in and say, hey, here's what it says. So
financial generosity, it's another one. I have guys going after it all over the place. My church barely taught on it. We kind of avoided it because people didn't come to church. Back to your other question about the where this thing, it's slipping my mind, man. I had a great thought and I lost it. Maybe a great thought. You may have told me it was stupid. It'll come
Let
back.
me say a word about Gen Z, and then Doug, you can, if you, maybe it'll trigger a thought. One, Doug and I are both raising Gen Z. My kids are in college. He's got one in college, one about to go to college. I have never had more hope for the future than with this coming generation. I just think it's the return of maybe the builder generation. If for those that have gotten through and been redeemed, especially, I think it's fraught with potential issues as well. But one thing, they so are yearning for balance and not extremes that that's in their personal life and their health, but also organizationally, I believe. I think they're going to trust institutions potentially more, but not institutionalization, but yet being together as a group, doing something awesome. There's a huge opportunity for mentorship, but the potential for the younger generation is to make that personal health and what have you, I believe, an idol. And so I think one of the signs I would be watching is when the cries, I don't exactly know, but the cries for the balance outweigh the call to the mission, because the mission does require we go into uncomfortable realms that our safe space gets a little bit violated, right? And that our health, even that all the things we're doing to maintain personal balance and health, those need to be shook and challenged. Or I think the downside could be safety, complacency, and a different type of inward focus. But
well, the
I've
time
never
you're most
been
balanced is the time you're not moving at all. I mean, that's when you're
right.
the most balanced. And so if you're moving, then you're getting out of balance at some point.
And we all know we grow in through pain and uncomfortability. We put
Right.
In
ourselves in
movement.
those situations. So anyway, that's just a little word about it. I'm so excited, but I do think, and I think there's an opportunity, David, to mobilize our other generations that are a little bit older to speak, because Gen Z is way open to that type of a relationship in our churches. So I think an opportunity for mentoring ministry and to give our older generations a purpose in pouring back into, if you can find the ones who are willing to start, there can be a movement of even mentorship and that kind of thing happening that we've not seen in a long time, potentially.
So what's funny about this conversation, my perception and image is you guys help create systems so that churches can scale. And I know you do believe in systems, and yet this conversation has all been almost more about you can't depend on the systems. It's all got to be about the foundation, which is all very true. So let's talk about systems real quickly because we're running out of time. But you guys do help churches create systems that will help them scale and grow, right? You do believe in systems. So.
Yeah, I think Bart, you take this. My thought came back. You asked about how would a leader know consumerism is kind of seeping in. I would say consumerism in a church is always at work. Christian consumer is the nature of human experience. Feed me. What about me? These questions we've heard all of our ministry careers. The two things I would tell your listeners to really think about. If you are really feeling that consumerism is overwhelming you, it probably comes back to you as the leader. And I would ask a couple of questions. Have you been making decisions out of fear of losing? And if you've been making ministry strategy decisions out of fear of losing, that's a sign that you may actually be fueling consumerism. And secondarily, if you have been chasing what we call silver bullets or some magical thing that's going to just turn around your church magically, and it's the greatest, you probably most likely are there. The unintended consequence of chasing silver bullets is underlying Christian consumerism. Like you're reinforcing it.
Interesting.
And yeah, so we could talk about that more. But Bart, anyway, you want to talk about
a good thought. That was a good thought. I'm glad you.
Okay, thank you for affirming. You could have
Yeah.
told me, David. I know we're just getting to know each other. You could have said, Doug, that sucked. I would have been fine.
Well, I would have, but it didn't. So it was a good thought. So
Yeah, we totally believe in systems, David. Like, and whoever's listening, like, I use this analogy sometimes. I don't think we're church doctors. I think we're more like personal trainers. So kind of our model, the IC model, and the thing we teach, the Red Book explains. We're now expanding it into 3 parts: a system for eldership or the board, a system for the leadership team, and a training for the congregation and being mobilized to live a one-aware and activated life. So the system has 3 parts, and we believe it includes rhythm and routine. It needs good constructs and frameworks that are easy to use and understand, that happen in a priority and sequence, that are calendared. None of this is real in terms of planning to be a one-aware and activated church, trying to achieve double evangelistic impact. We talk a lot about that. We have a reason behind that visioning frame. You got to do it in cycles. And we believe in the cycle. You know, Doug and I both work out. We may not look like it, but you wake up in the morning and you just do it. And that's a little bit of what we're trying to teach churches too, that in the name of the Great Commission, we can be proactive and we can be systematic and repetitive. But really, that is a hunt for the Holy Spirit's insight and direction. But the first thing we said early in this podcast was you need to level set our understanding of things. You have to define things clearly. Then we can systematically put a framework. We use we teach literally on sheets of paper, pictorial frameworks with questions driving the inside of to draw out the inside of the team and align the team. We teach you how to do that. We don't want to necessarily be doing it for you all the time. We believe you can do it on your own. You can calendar that activity, and you can not just do it as a senior team. You can also do it in your various areas in your church. Like literally, we call it intentional growth planning. And you could have your children's ministry doing intentional growth planning along with your student ministry and potentially the worship and programming ministry, let's say, and those plans being tied together into an overarching annual intentional growth plan. So many of our churches in our network now are teaching us about how to embed the rhythm and routines, and we're big believers in that, to get to that Great Commission end or outcome. And finally, I'll just say this: the system isn't necessarily going to always yield like some magical growth, but it's going to show you what you need to know in that next season. And so, I use the workout analogy. You just discover nutrition's my next challenge. Because I'm doing the workouts, I'm up against a lid or a barrier. And you'll learn that in church leadership. You run the play, you run the system. You just need to have the model in front of you to stay centered. You will discover different things are the challenge in different seasons. And some of that might be team culture. It might be something like a facility challenge. It might be a discipleship path type challenge that's in front of you. But if we didn't have the system and the model to do this together and discern from the Spirit, we would be left to those poor evaluation standards. And if you just go down the road of poor evaluation, the loudest voice is going to win, or the most powerful person. Sometimes, David, the person that gives the most money.
Yeah.
And so the system sort of level sets all of that. And so I'll say I always admire the leaders that embrace this, because it really takes humility, because our model has been send the main guy off. He's got the vision, bring him back. He'll tell us what to do. In our model, we believe the Spirit is the guide. God's guiding our church. The biblical fundamentals are what they are. We just need a good system to sit together and discern that. And that senior leader has a key role. We believe in the biblical leadership model, but for that leader to sit there and discern together with the team using the tools in the system, it's always been, being a PK, been like so moving to me, the leaders that run this thing we have. Yep.
So if I summarize what we've said so far today, we're really saying it starts with a foundation and what does your church exist? What's the reason for your church to exist? And it really is focusing on that one that maybe is not yet even in the church and focusing on them and how to lead them to Christ, help them to grow. And then everybody together is doing that in the church. Then you begin to build the systems from there.
Yep.
And focus on that. Yeah. So I love what you guys are saying. I love the thoughts that you're having. And appreciate very much the way you're describing things. If people are interested in going further, obviously the book they can pick up, The Intentional Church. I think you guys are going to do some stuff with us this fall with The Advantage. If I understand what Andy has said, at least we're talking about that. And so there'll be more conversation with this, but very much appreciate it. I mean, it's one thing to talk about ideas or think about them. It just helps to have people like yourselves have been through it before and you've actually kind of codified it or put it in a form that we can follow. And so I think that's a great thing. So great start there. And then obviously they can reach out and reach you guys. Is it essentially an Intentional Church that they can reach out and find you guys and talk to you further if there's interest?
Yeah, they could go to the website. Of course, there's a form there, or just quite simply, my email is doug.parks@intentionalchurches.com. They can email me and I will respond.
Yeah, good.
Same for me. And I will just clarify, it's Intentional Churches, ES, plural.
Good. Plural. Okay.
Just in case somebody's going to type that domain in,
Yeah, good.
.com or .org, either one, you'll end up at the website. And yeah, you can email us directly. We love talking to leaders, man.
And again, I feel like in our conversation today, we've been, I don't know if it's been broader and it's hard to get like some tangibles. And yet the funny thing is on the subtitle to your book is how implementing an operating system clarifies vision, improves decision making, and simulates growth. And so you guys really do work towards saying, here's the system that will help us to grow, but it's got to be on the right foundation. And I love that. I think that's fantastic to see. It's fun to talk to you guys. I like the backgrounds you have, even though it's not a denomination. It's still it's a movement. It's a brotherhood. I appreciate that. And so fun to hear that and look forward to further conversations. I cut you off, Doug. You were going to say something, which because of the Steeler hat behind you, it's so distracting. I've got
2006 autograph Super Bowl helmet at church
It's
game.
very distracting, but it's better than an Eagles helmet. I will say that. So
just real quickly, I was going to say, look for it this fall. This book is coming out now. Our whole community's been shaping the final copy. It's called Radical Alignment: the Surprising Journey to Being an Intentional Church, and it's basically 1,000 churches in. Here's what we've learned.
Good,
And
that's great.
It's been pretty powerful so far. It's a prequel to the Red Book in essence, and highlighting some of the things you're saying about, that it starts with the base, and that's what this is telling us. It starts with the base, not with the system first.
One other question I'll ask just real quick. So let's say somebody decides we're not going to focus on the one. We just want to build the people that are already here. Is there hope for that church or just not within your structure or construct, or what do you guys say to that?
Bart?
Yeah, there's hope. I do tell a story in that Radical Alignment book. One of them is that I'll just say this. Discipleship or evangelism aren't separate things and aren't a choice. And I talk about one of our discoveries has been how we've created those as two different things, right?
Binary,
and one or the other. And the truth is they're combined in the Great Commission. And you can't be a disciple without evangelizing. You can't make a disciple without evangelizing. So ultimately, I've seen churches try to get through, I'm going to teach the heart and the depth, and eventually they're going to be mobilized. I would just say, make it the first thing you teach them. And if you do that, you're going to have all kinds of one-aware problems in your church, which are awesome problems because they're going to be reaching people. So that's what I would say.
And I would say, because Jesus did it that way. Because he did. Go look at what he did. The first thing he taught a new believer.
Exactly. Yeah, very good. Hey, real fun talking to you guys. I look forward to further conversations with you. Fun to see what you're doing and the work that you're accomplishing, and excited for that. So thank you for taking time to talk to our guys, and we'll look forward to further conversations down the road.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, Bart. Thanks, Doug. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you for listening to the Advantage Podcast with David Ashcraft and for participating in our goal to strengthen and encourage pastors and their churches so more people are introduced to Jesus across Pennsylvania. If you found this helpful, feel free to pass it along. To find out more about the work of The Advantage, visit our website at theadvantage.org.